Hi, Babalwa.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon, or rather this morning. It's the second day of the presidential summit. Yesterday was quite intense, and I was wondering if we could chat about the role of media in the sector. I saw a few media houses, small ones, walking around, and I know you've got a background in media, in content production. And within the Summit Planning Committee, you hold a position as the co-chair of the media planning team. And so, what has been your perspective on the role of media in the gender-based violence sector?
I think the role of media is quite important because it drives the conversation, but also is also informing the public about the actual work of the progress of GBV, what is the actual problem, what is being done, what is not being done. So from my perspective, the role of the media currently is that we are more event driven.
Right.
We report on GBV cases when someone was raped or someone was brutally killed. And every day we know that women are being killed, women are being raped. But because I think I'm also guilty of this because I'm also in the media space, but I think also we have that notion that the more gruesome the story, the more juicier it is, the more headlines it will make. So we are more event driven on Women's Month. Or like, oh yes, we have GBV, let's talk about GBV. 16 days is coming up, now we will talk about GBV. But are we really looking into the GBV problem? Because even now, a lot of people, it's so bad because even the NGOs that are here, they don't even know what the NSP is. And that is what the media should also be playing. How will NSP assist in ending GBV? Do people know how to participate? And also that thing as well is that GBV is not only a government problem, it's not only a civil society problem. Everyone must participate.
Right.
But we don't really have those conversations because we're always reporting what this government is doing, what this person is reacting. But how are we all, civil society, media, government, everyone on the ground must participate to NGBV.
So when you say the NSP, you're referring to the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence.
Yes.
And then there was something you said earlier I want to pick up on, that the more gory the story, the more interest there is in the media covering it. So would it be fair to say that the goriness or the drama or the sensationalism of GBV in our country is actually a form of currency in the media space?
It is. It really is. And it also, because I feel like, I'm talking now from my own woman perspective, is that the more gruesome a case is and the more it's trending on social media, we focus on that. But how many, we are now choosing who to focus on. We are now choosing which GBV victims to talk about on the public, who must we advocate for, but we should actually be advocating all GBV cases. There's no bigger, there's no better, all GBV. And also, I think there was a campaign that I think government should actually be fighting for, that the hashtag 365 of GBV. We should talk about gender-based violence every day. We shouldn't choose which case to talk about and which case not to talk about. And you actually find, because I think there was this discussion as well on protesting, is that when the media cover protest, it's now influencing other people from other communities to say, actually, we're also not happy. So for us to get attention from government, let's burn this entire building. And then you have the same problem in another country. So what about when we are now more reporting on gruesome cases, what are we basically saying? Because now, isn't it basically motivating men to? Because now it's like, oh, okay, yes, there's a gruesome killing, and when it's a rape case, it's a small rape case, it's not that important. So now we are focusing on so many gruesome. I don't know if it actually has a role that it plays, but when we are focusing on so many gruesome cases, it's like, what conversation is that even? What conversation is that sparking? Yeah.
So from my perspective, as also just a woman's perspective, but also coming from a mental health space, it desensitizes people. That the more gruesome content we see, and sometimes what you see on the news is worse than what you see in the movies. and the movie you can turn off and walk away from, but the news is also, it's real life happening now, so you can't really avoid it. But I think it desensitizes people. The more we see of it, the more we think that it becomes okay. And I want to distinguish here between something that happens frequent, being regarded as normal, versus something that happens frequent and should be regarded as abnormal. But because of the frequency, we just think this is
normalized.
The way it is.
It's normalized.
So as far as I'm concerned, rape has become normalized. As far as I'm concerned, the gruesome murder and dismemberment of women and children
It's
has
now
become
going to a
normalized.
point where it's being normalized.
So, because you can hardly go through a day without hearing some sort of story on that level. And so, how would you think the media can then report on these things as real life events, but in such a way that it doesn't use gore to desensitize people?
That's a very interesting question. I think that's what the media should. I think we actually need to have this conversation as many media houses, and then how do we draw the line? How do we draw the line and say, are we informing the public? Because also there's also that part of educating the public. So are we just gonna tell people this is what's happening and that is it? What is the end goal of us reporting on gender-based violence? Do we want people to actually be motivated to take action, or do we want to say, oh, someone else got killed today, what's next? Let's move on with our lives. So I think that's what we need. We need to have a motive, but also we can't really attack so much of the media, because you find that most times when we are exposing these kind of stories, it's actually putting more action on government to actually act, because now we are holding government in a way accountable that this is a crisis. What are you doing about it? So I think also it does help, but also we need to have another way of saying, okay, what is the end goal of our GBV reporting? And I also was thinking about this yesterday, that you find that we have an econ desk in the newsroom. We have a politics desk, but we have a GBV desk. We need to have constant reporting, because we find that now when you talk about GBV, like again, it's an event, and we are not really going deeper into GBV reporting. We don't really say gender roles. What do we have to say about gender roles? Because they also play a huge role in gender-based violence. The fact that there's a man, there's a female, but also at home I'm earning more than my husband or my boyfriend. And now my husband thinks because I earn more, now I'm the man of the house. So what is actually masculinity? That's another question that we need to talk about. That we need to talk about gender roles. We have to have conversations about gender roles. We need to have conversations about masculinity. We need to have conversations about civil society organizations. What are they really doing? And how can we all participate? Yeah.
And that's such an important point, that it needs to be about opening conversations.
Yeah.
So in our capacity as Collective Action Magazine, we have specifically got a clause in our call for submissions that we put out for every edition, that we were going to decline content that could be regarded as triggering. So photographs, articles with graphic language, we actually edit it out, or we decline those entirely, because we're not trying to drive the conversation based on how sensationalistic it is. Because like you said, if the sensationalist articles are getting attention, the other things that are equally important but less gruesome kind of get sidelined.
Then even now we are saying to government and the police and the criminal justice system, focus on these gruesome cases and forget about the one that we weigh as not as important.
Correct,
So,
absolutely. And what you were saying about opening up conversations for me is really important, because not so long ago the media really held the right to the dissemination of information. And now there's TikTok, there's YouTube, people have cell phones with cameras. Any person, anywhere, can be a content creator and disseminate that. And so I think the media has a role in bringing sobriety to a space which is completely unregulated, it's ungoverned. Thank God for freedom of speech.
Yeah.
But that also means that anyone can say anything at any time about anybody. And whilst we have some legislation around the accountability of things that are said on social media platforms, it's not really enforceable yet. It's all very new space for us. And so, how could the media, using these social media platforms, um, take a hold of bringing sobriety, bringing sensible thinking into the way that is done? And I want to give you an example of something. Even within our NSP WhatsApp groups, and we have many, every pillar's got WhatsApp groups, every working group has got sub-working group is WhatsApp groups. Um, I have seen and been fighting for the last almost 2 years now the posting of gruesome content. So when a new victim, is discovered, there's always a story about what happened to that person, and sometimes quite gruesome photographs of crime scenes. And unfortunately, participants within the NSP collaborative will post this content in what is, in my view, a public WhatsApp group. And so sometimes you wake up on a Saturday morning and the very first thing you see is a picture of a mutilated person. This is before I've brushed my teeth and had coffee, and it's a weekend.
It's even worse for the family members of that person who was killed.
Exactly, and that's where I was going. So not only is the sector being traumatized by our own inability to screen what is appropriate and what is not appropriate to share, but that stuff now circulates everywhere and the family is traumatized. And so it's quite an ungoverned, unregulated space. Do you have views on how these WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups can govern themselves more effectively so that they're not leveraging the gruesome sensationalism in order to drive the message, but are in fact leveraging the importance of the message itself?
I think also, like you said, that this online is quite new. And I think social media is growing. 2 years ago, we were obsessed with Facebook and Instagram. Now we have TikTok. But I think also the owners of this social tools like your Facebook and your Instagram and your Twitter, I think they are trying to actually regulate the content that is actually being out there, because now you can actually find that when someone posts a gruesome picture, you can actually report it.
Yeah.
That is another way of actually regulating what content that we see. But you find that reporting process, it takes a while. Even if you actually clone my account, I now have to report your account, but it won't be directly down immediately. There will be a process, and so I think those who are actually in charge of the social media tools, they need to strengthen also their regulations when it comes to content. When it comes to content, how do we know this is how do we know that this is gruesome content? Let's immediately put it down. Let's not wait for weeks because now you find that in most cases they must first investigate. But what's there to investigate? So yeah, I think it also needs those social media tools, those who are in charge, to also consider these kind of contents.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Babalwa, can you give us a closing comment that just encapsulates your perspective on the role of media for the sector? Just one sentence to sum it up.
I think one sentence to summarize it up is that you talked about social media conversations as well, but I think what is nice about the media is that we can regulate the conversations, and we can make sure that all sides are being heard. We are not pushing a certain agenda, and there's objectivity. You know what I mean? And also, another thing that I've realized is that funding on GBV media, on GBV messaging, there's not much funding, so people don't have the content. Because even SABC was here, and they were saying because we are here for free, we have other news that we have to cover. So now we had to pull out cameras because we have to go and use something else. But had we had media buying with broadcasters, then we'll be here the entire day and people will be getting information because we have a partnership GBV and GBV government has a partnership, as they should, with the media, because the media is there to report and publicize, but now the media is limited because we don't have the resources as well as the media. So we want to talk more about media and GBV, but also we don't have the resources, and yeah.
Understood. Babalwa, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much
It's
for
been a
having
pleasure
me.
to interview you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.